Picture this. It's 120 CE, and you're about to step into what might be the most sophisticated piece of engineering the ancient world ever created. Not a temple, not a colosseum, but something far more intimate and revolutionary. You're about to enter a Roman bathhouse, where cutting-edge technology meets daily luxury in ways that would make modern spa owners weep with envy. But here's the thing, most people don't realize about Roman baths. They weren't just places to get clean. These weren't your neighborhood swimming pools, with a few hot tubs thrown in for good measure. Roman baths were engineering marvels that required more technical expertise than building a cathedral. We're talking about massive heating systems that could warm entire city blocks, water management that puts modern plumbing to shame, and maintenance operations that never stopped, day or night. The numbers alone will blow your mind. A single large bath complex could go through over 300,000 gallons of water every single day. That's enough to fill up 12 average-sized swimming pools, dumped out and refilled fresh. The fuel consumption was equally staggering. Some bathhouses burned through more wood in a week than an entire Roman villa would use in a year. And the heat. We're talking about maintaining precise temperatures across multiple rooms, some reaching levels that would make a modern sauna jealous. Before we dive deeper into this incredible world of ancient engineering, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like, and definitely drop a comment about what you find most fascinating about Roman bath technology. Trust me, by the end of this series, you're going to have plenty to say about just how mind-blowing these places really were. Now let's step back in time and walk through the front doors of one of these magnificent complexes. But fair warning, what you're about to discover will completely change how you think about ancient Rome's technological capabilities. Your journey begins in the Epidicterium, which sounds fancy but was basically the world's first upscale changing room. Think of it as the lobby of the most exclusive spa you've ever seen, except it was built nearly 2,000 years ago. The moment you walked in, you'd be hit by the organized chaos of Roman social life. Wealthy citizens stripping down next to freed slaves, merchants chatting with politicians, everyone united by the simple desire to get clean and relax. The Epidicterium wasn't just about changing clothes, though. It was a carefully designed space that served as the social hub of the entire complex. The walls were lined with niches and shelves where bathers stored their belongings. But here's where it gets interesting. The Romans had already figured out the security problem. They employed capsari, basically ancient locker room attendants, whose entire job was to watch your stuff while you batted. These guys were the unsung heroes of Roman bath culture, because let's face it, even in ancient Rome, people were probably swiping sandals and togas when nobody was looking. The design of the Epidicterium was pure genius. High ceilings kept the air circulating, while strategically placed windows provided natural light without creating drafts. The floors were usually made of beautiful mosaics, not just for decoration, but because the patterns helped guide foot traffic. Those seemingly random designs actually created subtle pathways that prevented crowding and kept people moving smoothly toward the next area. But the real magic started when you left the changing room and entered the palaestra. This was the exercise courtyard, and it was where the Romans proved they understood something modern fitness experts are just figuring out. You need to work up a sweat before you truly appreciate getting clean. The palaestra wasn't just a big empty space where people ran around aimlessly. It was a carefully planned fitness complex with different areas for different activities. Wrestling was huge. These weren't casual friendly matches either. Romans took their wrestling seriously, and the palaestra provided sand-covered areas specifically designed for grappling. The sand served multiple purposes. It provided cushioning for falls, absorbed sweat and blood, and could be easily replaced when it got too gross, which, given how seriously Romans took their wrestling, probably happened pretty regularly. Weight training had its own designated zones. Romans used stone and lead weights that would put modern gym equipment to shame. Some of these weights were so heavy It took 2 people just to move them into position. The Romans understood progressive training long before anyone gave it a fancy name. They started with lighter weights and gradually worked up to the monsters that could challenge even the strongest athletes. Running tracks circled the entire complex. These weren't just straight lines either. Roman engineers designed curved tracks that allowed for continuous running without having to stop and turn around. The surface was carefully maintained with a mixture of sand and clay that provided the perfect balance between grip and give. Too hard, and runners would injure their joints. Too soft, and they'd waste energy fighting the surface instead of building speed. But here's what made the Palestra truly special. It was integrated with the bathing process in ways that modern spas can only dream about. The exercise areas were positioned to catch the morning sun, warming up athletes naturally while they worked out. Shade structures could be deployed during the hottest parts of the day, and the entire space was designed to channel breezes from the main bathing areas, creating natural air conditioning. The social aspect was just as important as the physical exercise. Romans used the Palestra as a place to see and be seen. Business deals were struck between sets of weightlifting. Political alliances were forged during wrestling matches. Young men showed off their physiques to potential marriage prospects, while older citizens shared wisdom and gossip during leisurely walks around the running track. After working up a proper sweat in the Palestra, you'd begin the main event, the bathing circuit. This wasn't a casual stroll from room to room. It was a precisely choreographed journey that took advantage of the most sophisticated heating and cooling system the ancient world had ever seen. The sequence was always the same: tepidarium, caldarium, frigidarium, and sometimes back again. But behind this simple routine was an engineering masterpiece that would make modern HVAC technicians weep with admiration. The tepidarium was your first stop, and it was basically the ancient equivalent of a warm-up room. The temperature was kept at a comfortable level that prepared your body for the extreme heat of the caldarium without shocking your system. But achieving that perfect temperature wasn't just a matter of lighting a fire and hoping for the best. Roman engineers had figured out how to create precise climate control using nothing but fire, water, and brilliant design. The secret was something called the Hypocaust system, and it was so ingenious that we're still using variations of it today. Imagine taking your entire house and lifting it 3 feet off the ground, then filling that space with a network of pillars and channels that could carry hot air to exactly where you wanted it. That's essentially what the Romans did, except they did it with buildings that could hold thousands of people at once. The Hypocaust worked by creating a furnace room called the Prefernium, where teams of workers called stokers fed massive fires day and night. These weren't casual campfires either. We're talking about roaring infernos that consumed wagon loads of wood and charcoal every single day. The heat from these fires was channeled through carefully designed passages that ran under the floors and up through the walls of the bathing rooms. But here's where Roman engineering gets really impressive. They didn't just blast hot air everywhere and call it good. Different rooms needed different temperatures, and the Hypocaust system could deliver exactly what each space required. The tepidarium needed gentle warmth, the caldarium needed serious heat, and the areas in between needed precise gradations that kept bathers comfortable as they moved from space to space. The stokers who ran these systems were specialists who understood their craft better than most modern heating technicians understand theirs. They knew exactly which types of wood burned hottest, how to bank fires for overnight heating, and how to adjust airflow to maintain precise temperatures in rooms they never even entered. These guys were the unsung heroes of Roman bath culture, working in conditions that would make a modern boiler room look like a luxury office. The temperature control in these furnace rooms was absolutely brutal. We're talking about working environments that regularly hit 120 degrees Fahrenheit, with humidity levels that would make a rainforest feel dry. Yet these stokers had to maintain their fires with precision that would impress modern engineers. They couldn't just throw wood on the flames and walk away. Every piece of fuel had to be carefully selected and positioned to create the exact heat output needed for each room above. Different woods burned at different temperatures and for different lengths of time. Oak provided long, steady heat perfect for maintaining base temperatures throughout the night. Pine created quick, intense flames ideal for rapidly heating the caldarium during peak hours. Charcoal was reserved for the most demanding situations when maximum heat was absolutely critical. The stokers became masters at reading their fires, adjusting fuel mixtures like ancient chemists, creating the perfect combustion recipe. But feeding the fires was only half the job. The real skill came in managing the airflow through the hypocaust channels. These underground passages weren't just random tunnels. They were carefully engineered networks that could direct hot air with surgical precision. Adjustable vents and dampers allowed stokers to increase heat to one room while reducing it in another, all without ever leaving the furnace area. The most experienced stokers could tell exactly what was happening in the bathing rooms above just by listening to the sounds in the hypocaust system. A particular whistle meant too much air was flowing to the caldarium. A subtle rumble indicated that the tepidarium needed more heat. These guys developed an almost supernatural ability to diagnose problems through sound alone. They were like ancient heating system whisperers, except instead of talking to horses, they were having conversations with furnaces. Water management was even more complex than the heating system. Roman bath engineers had figured out how to deliver thousands of gallons of water at precisely the right temperatures to multiple pools simultaneously. This wasn't just a matter of heating up a big tank and hoping for the best. Different pools required different temperatures, and those temperatures had to be maintained constantly as fresh water flowed in and used water flowed out. The key was a system of bronze boilers positioned directly over the main furnaces. These weren't the simple water heaters you might imagine. They were sophisticated heat exchangers that could produce water at multiple temperature ranges from a single fire source. The hottest water went directly to the caldarium pools, while partially cooled water was diverted to the tepidarium. Even the frigidarium benefited from this system, as the contrast between hot and cold water was carefully calibrated to provide maximum therapeutic benefit. Supply lines came from aqueducts that could deliver millions of gallons per day, but getting that water to the right places at the right temperatures required engineering that would challenge modern plumbers. Header tanks positioned throughout the complex stored water at different temperature ranges, while an intricate network of lead and ceramic pipes distributed it according to demand. The Romans had essentially invented on-demand hot water systems, 18 centuries before anyone thought to patent the idea. The Castellum was the nerve center of this entire water operation. Think of it as the mission control for Roman bath water management. From this central location, engineers could monitor water levels, adjust flow rates, and redirect supply lines to meet changing demand throughout the day. Morning rush hour required different water management strategies than evening relaxation time, and the Castellum operators had to stay one step ahead of bather patterns to ensure nobody ever ran out of hot water. Drainage was just as critical as supply. All that water had to go somewhere, and the Romans had figured out how to remove thousands of gallons of used bath water without backing up the entire system. Underground sewers carried away the constant flow of dirty water, while overflow channels prevented flooding during peak usage periods. The engineering required to keep water flowing in the right directions at the right speeds was mind-boggling. But what really set Roman baths apart was the attention to detail in the user experience. Every surface you touched, every step you took, every breath you drew had been carefully planned by engineers who understood that comfort was just as important as functionality. The floors in the heated rooms weren't just warm, they were precisely the right temperature to feel pleasant on bare feet without causing burns. This was achieved through a brilliant system called suspensurae, essentially adjustable floor supports that allowed engineers to control exactly how much heat reached the surface. These weren't just random pillars holding up the floor. They were carefully sized and positioned to create temperature zones that matched how people actually used each space. Areas where bathers typically stood were kept cooler than areas where they sat or reclined. The floor tiles themselves were removable, which meant maintenance crews could access the hypercast system without tearing apart entire rooms. When something went wrong with the heating system, and something always went wrong, workers could lift specific tiles, make repairs, and replace the floor surface without disrupting the entire bathing operation. It was like having a computer with removable panels, except this computer was the size of a city block and ran on fire instead of electricity. Soot management was a constant battle. All that burning wood and charcoal created massive amounts of ash and residue that had to be removed regularly, or the entire system would clog up like a dirty chimney. Maintenance crews worked around the clock, raking ash from furnaces, cleaning soot from flue tiles, and descaling the bronze boilers that provided hot water. These weren't glamorous jobs, but they were absolutely essential to keeping the baths operational. The flue tiles that carried hot air up through the walls were particularly prone to problems. Soot would build up over time, reducing airflow and creating hot spots that could crack the tiles or even start fires. Cleaning crews had developed specialized tools for scraping these narrow vertical channels, and they knew exactly which tiles needed attention based on subtle changes in how the system sounded when it was running. Descaling the bronze boilers was probably the most technically demanding maintenance job in the entire complex. These weren't just big metal pots sitting over fires. They were precision-engineered heat exchangers with internal baffles, temperature regulation chambers, and complex inlet and outlet systems that could clog up faster than you could say mineral deposits. The water coming through the aqueducts wasn't exactly spring fresh either. It picked up all sorts of dissolved minerals during its journey from the mountains, and when you heated that water to near boiling temperatures day after day, those minerals turned into crusty deposits that could shut down the entire system. The descaling crews were like ancient plumbers with a PhD in chemistry. They knew exactly which acids would dissolve calcium buildup without damaging the bronze, how to disassemble complex boiler systems without flooding the furnace rooms, and most importantly, how to work in temperatures that would make a pizza oven feel cool. These guys would crawl inside boilers that were still warm from the previous day's firing, scraping away mineral deposits with specially designed tools that looked more like surgical instruments than cleaning equipment. But the real heroes of bath maintenance were the tile patchers. Roman floors weren't just decorative, they were functional components of a complex heating system. When tiles cracked from thermal stress or heavy foot traffic, they didn't just create an eyesore, they created heat leaks that could throw off the temperature balance of entire rooms. Patching these tiles required understanding how heat flowed through the floor system, which tiles were load-bearing, and how to create repairs that would last through thousands of heating and cooling cycles. The tile patchers had developed their own specialized mortar recipes that expanded and contracted at exactly the same rate as the original Roman concrete. Too rigid, and the patches would crack the first time the hypercaust heated up. Too flexible, and they'd crumble under the weight of hundreds of daily bathers. These craftsmen were mixing ancient chemistry in ways that modern materials scientists are still trying to understand. Meanwhile, upstairs in the actual bathing areas, a completely different kind of precision was happening. The bath attendants weren't just there to hand you a towel. These were skilled professionals who understood human anatomy, massage therapy, and the proper application of oils and scrapers that could transform your skin from grimy to glowing. The whole process was like having a personal spa treatment that had been refined over centuries of practice. The oil application alone was an art form. Different oils were used for different skin types and different stages of the bathing process. Olive oil was the standard, but wealthy bathers could choose from exotic blends that included everything from Egyptian perfumes to rare spices from India. The attendants knew exactly how much oil to apply, how to work it into the skin to maximize absorption, and how to time the application so the oil would be perfectly ready for the next stage of treatment. Then came the strigils, curved metal scrapers that looked more like surgical instruments than bath accessories. Using these things properly required serious skill. Too much pressure, and you'd scrape off skin along with the dirt and oil. Too little pressure, and you'd leave behind the grime you were trying to remove. The best attendants could work a strigil like a master painter working a brush, removing layers of sweat and dead skin while leaving the healthy skin underneath perfectly smooth. The strigil technique varied depending on what part of the body was being cleaned. Arms and legs required long, smooth strokes that followed the muscle groups. The back needed careful attention to avoid the spine while still reaching every inch of skin. Even the feet got specialized treatment, with tiny strigils designed to clean between toes and around nails. These attendants were basically ancient exfoliation experts who could give you better skincare than most modern spas. But here's what made the Roman bathing experience truly special: the timing. Everything was choreographed to work together. You'd enter the tepidarium just as your body temperature was perfectly prepared for the gentle warmth. The oil application happened at exactly the moment when your pores were most receptive. The strigil scraping occurred when the combination of heat, moisture, and oils had loosened every bit of dirt and dead skin on your body. The caldarium was where things got serious. This wasn't just a hot room. It was a precisely controlled environment that could reach temperatures of 140 degrees Fahrenheit while maintaining humidity levels that prevented the air from becoming unbearably dry. Walking into the caldarium was like stepping into a carefully calibrated oven designed for human comfort rather than cooking food. The heat hit you in waves, starting with your feet as the heated floors warmed your entire body from the ground up. The pools in the caldarium weren't just filled with hot water. They were thermal therapy systems that had been engineered to provide maximum therapeutic benefit. The water temperature was maintained at exactly the right level to increase blood circulation without causing heat stroke. The depth was calculated to allow bathers to sit comfortably while keeping their heads above water. Even the shape of the pools was designed to promote gentle water circulation that prevented hot spots and ensured even heat distribution. But the real genius of the caldarium was how it prepared your body for the shock that was coming next. The extreme heat opened every pore, increased blood flow to the skin surface, and raised your core body temperature to levels that would make the transition to the frigidarium not just tolerable but actually pleasant. Without this careful preparation, jumping into cold water would have been torture instead of therapy. The frigidarium was where Roman engineers proved they understood thermal shock therapy better than most modern medical professionals. The cold pools weren't just filled with chilly water and left alone. They were part of a sophisticated temperature management system that maintained water at precisely the right temperature to provide maximum therapeutic benefit without causing dangerous shock to the cardiovascular system. The water in the frigidarium was kept at around 60 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to cause immediate vasoconstriction and close the pores that had been opened in the caldarium, but not so cold as to cause hypothermia or dangerous drops in body temperature. The Romans had figured out through centuries of experimentation that this specific temperature range provided the perfect balance between therapeutic benefit and safety. The transition from caldarium to frigidarium wasn't just about temperature shock, though. It was about timing your body's response to create maximum health benefits. The heat of the caldarium increased circulation and opened pores. The cold of the frigidarium closed those pores and forced blood back toward the core organs. This thermal cycling was like giving your cardiovascular system a complete workout without doing any actual exercise. Some bathers would repeat this hot-cold cycle multiple times, and the bath attendants knew exactly how many cycles each person could handle based on their age, health, and experience level. First-time visitors might only do one gentle cycle, while experienced bathers could handle 5 or 6 complete circuits that would challenge even modern athletes. The attendants monitored each bather carefully, watching for signs of thermal stress and knowing exactly when to recommend moving to the next stage of the process. The social dynamics happening during all this thermal therapy were just as complex as the engineering. Roman baths weren't just about getting clean, they were about networking, deal-making, and social positioning. The wealthy might spend hours in the caldarium discussing business ventures, while politicians used the relaxed atmosphere to build alliances and negotiate agreements. Even slaves and freed men found opportunities to advance their social standing through casual conversations that happened between the hot and cold pools. The Capsari, watching over everyone's belongings, had front-row seats to some of the most important conversations in Roman society. These guys heard everything: business secrets, political plots, romantic intrigue, family disputes. They were like ancient bartenders, except instead of serving drinks, they were guarding togas and sandals while overhearing the conversations that shaped the Roman Empire. But what made this whole system truly remarkable wasn't just the individual components, it was how everything worked together as a single integrated machine. The furnace workers feeding fires in the basement were synchronized with the water management teams monitoring flow rates, who were coordinated with the maintenance crews cleaning tiles and descaling boilers, who worked alongside the bath attendants providing personalized service to hundreds of daily customers. The logistics alone were staggering. A major bath complex might serve 3,000 people per day, each requiring personalized attention, precise temperature control, and perfectly timed service. The fuel consumption required careful planning months in advance, as did the water supply management and the scheduling of maintenance activities that couldn't interrupt daily operations. The most impressive part wasn't that the Romans built these incredible facilities. It was that they kept them running smoothly, day after day, year after year, for centuries. These weren't monuments that sat empty waiting for special occasions. They were working industrial facilities that provided luxury services to thousands of people every single day, using technology that wouldn't be matched again for over 1,000 years. The precision required to keep these systems running was absolutely mind-blowing. Every morning before dawn, teams of workers would begin their daily routine that was more complex than launching a modern space shuttle. The stokers had to calculate exactly how much fuel each furnace needed based on the weather, the expected number of bathers, and even the time of year. Winter operations required completely different fuel loads than summer sessions, and a miscalculation could mean either freezing customers or overheating the entire complex to dangerous levels. But here's where Roman bath operations get really fascinating. They had developed quality control systems that would make modern manufacturing plants jealous. Temperature checkers would test each room with specialized bronze instruments that could measure heat levels with incredible accuracy. Water quality inspectors examined every pool for clarity, mineral content, and proper circulation. Even the oil supplies were tested daily to ensure they hadn't gone rancid or been contaminated with inferior products. The scheduling was like conducting a symphony orchestra, except instead of musical instruments, you were coordinating furnaces, water pumps, cleaning crews, and customer flow. Peak hours required all systems running at maximum capacity, while off-peak periods allowed for maintenance and deep cleaning that couldn't happen when bathers were present. The master schedulers who ran these operations knew exactly when to rotate staff, when to increase fuel loads, and when to redirect water flow based on usage patterns they'd memorized over years of experience. Speaking of staff rotation, the Romans had figured out something modern businesses are still learning about employee management. The furnace workers couldn't stay in those brutal heat conditions for more than a few hours at a time without risking heat stroke or exhaustion. So they developed shift systems that rotated fresh workers into the hottest jobs while moving tired workers to cooler positions. The most experienced stokers worked the morning startup shifts when precision was most critical, while newer workers handled the steadier afternoon maintenance periods. The water management crews faced their own unique challenges. Roman aqueduct water wasn't exactly crystal clear spring water. It picked up sediment, leaves, dead animals, and who knows what else during its journey from the mountains to the city. Before this water could enter the pristine pools where wealthy Romans soaked, it had to be filtered and purified using techniques that were surprisingly sophisticated for their time. The filtration systems used layers of sand, gravel, and cloth to remove particles and debris. But the real innovation was in the settling tanks, where water was allowed to sit for hours while heavier contaminants sank to the bottom. The clean water was then carefully skimmed from the top using specialized siphon systems that didn't disturb the settled sediment. These settling tanks had to be cleaned regularly, which meant draining thousands of gallons and scrubbing out accumulated muck by hand. Even more impressive was how they handled water recycling. The Romans had figured out that certain types of used bath water could be cleaned and reused for less critical applications. Water from the tepidarium, which was only mildly contaminated, could be processed and used for cleaning floors or watering the gardens that surrounded many bath complexes. The caldarium water, which was heavily contaminated with oils and human residue, went straight to the sewers, but water from the frigidarium, which stayed relatively clean, could sometimes be recycled back into the system after proper treatment. The treatment process for recycled water involved multiple stages of settling, filtering, and sometimes even boiling to kill any harmful organisms. The Romans didn't understand bacteria in the modern sense, but they knew that certain treatments made water safer to use. They'd discovered through trial and error that water heated to specific temperatures and held there for certain periods of time was less likely to cause illness when reused. So there you have it. Roman baths weren't just fancy swimming pools for rich people. They were technological masterpieces that combined precision engineering with luxury service in ways that wouldn't be matched for over a millennium. From the moment you walked into that apoditerium to your final plunge in the frigidarium, every single detail had been calculated, tested, and perfected by generations of engineers who understood that true luxury comes from making the impossible look effortless. The next time you step into a modern spa or turn on your hot water tap, remember those Roman stokers sweating in 120-degree furnace rooms and those maintenance crews crawling through soot-filled hypercourse channels. They created something that was part social club, part engineering marvel, and completely revolutionary. What blows my mind most is that while we were touring just one bath complex, there were hundreds of these incredible facilities operating across the Roman Empire, each one a testament to human ingenuity and the pursuit of the perfect bath. Makes you wonder what those ancient engineers could have accomplished with modern technology, doesn't it?